Earthquakes, they're one of the most powerful and honestly unpredictable forces on the planet. They can strike without any warning at all. But what if I told you the biggest danger isn't the shaking itself, but what happens right after? We all instinctively think that the initial tremor is what causes all the devastation. But it turns out the reality is way more complicated than that. The real catastrophe? That often starts to unfold in the moments and minutes that follow, from dangers we might actually be able to prevent. Yeah, the real damage comes from what happens next. So that's the big question, isn't it? How do we fight back against the aftermath? What can we do to protect ourselves when literally every single second counts? To answer that, first things first, we've got to understand what these hidden dangers really are. The secondary effects that can turn a scary situation into an absolute catastrophe. So, once the ground stops moving, a whole new wave of threats appears. We're talking about ruptured gas lines, which can lead to huge explosions and out-of-control fires. Then you have the electrical grids failing, plunging whole cities into darkness and totally crippling communication. And all of that just makes it so much harder for first responders to do their jobs. And look, this isn't just a guess. It's a cold, hard fact. The vast majority of damage and, tragically, loss of life doesn't come from the quake itself. It comes from these follow-up hazards, and that is the critical problem that we really need to solve. All right, so if we want to build a better defense, we've got to know what we're up against. Let's do a quick dive into the science of what's actually happening, deep down beneath our feet. Okay, so at its core, an earthquake is just a really violent shake caused by the movement of these enormous tectonic plates. The best way to think about them is like giant interlocking puzzle pieces that make up the Earth's surface, and they are always, always moving. So here's what's happening. Deep down. These massive plates are constantly grinding against one another. Now, the friction along their edges, what we call fault lines, builds up an incredible amount of stress, sometimes for decades. And when that pressure finally becomes too much to hold, bam! It's released in a sudden, massive burst of energy. And that energy is the shaking that we feel up on the surface. So if the danger is immediate and the aftermath is just devastating, our response has to be just as fast, right? We need something like an automated guardian. Let's see how technology can give us exactly that kind of protection. And this is where the solution comes in. It's a proactive concept called the automatic earthquake safety model. You can think of it like a technological first responder that's always on duty. The whole idea here is speed. This system can detect the very first vibrations and, without waiting for a person to react, it instantly triggers crucial safety measures. It's completely autonomous, and it's designed to save lives in those first few critical, chaotic seconds. Okay, so it all sounds great in theory, but how does this automated guardian actually work? Let's break down the mechanics. Really, it all boils down to 4 simple but super effective steps. First, it detects the vibration. Then it processes that signal. Then it triggers an automated shutdown of key utilities. And finally, it sounds an early warning alarm. Let's check out the parts that make all this happen. First up, you've got the brain of the whole operation, an Arduino microcontroller. This tiny little computer is where all the thinking happens. It takes the data from the sensor and, in real time, decides if the shaking is serious enough to be a real threat. And of course, every brain needs nerves, right? Well, that's where this highly sensitive vibration sensor comes in. This little guy is constantly monitoring the ground, acting as the system's eyes and ears, basically just waiting to feel that very first tremor. And finally, to complete the picture, you need muscles. As soon as the brain gives the order, a powerful servo motor jumps into action. It physically turns a lever to shut off the main gas supply, or it flips a breaker to cut the electricity. Brains, nerves, and muscles, all working together in perfect sync in just a matter of seconds. So we have this amazing piece of tech, but what does it really mean for all of us in the real world? Let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, the broader impact of this kind of smart safety. So, why is this such a game changer? Well, for one, a machine's reaction time is almost instant, way faster than any human could ever hope to be. Automatically cutting the gas is probably one of the single best ways to prevent those awful post-quake fires. That alarm gives people precious seconds to drop, cover, and hold on. And maybe the best part? This tech isn't just for huge buildings. It can be scaled for our homes, our schools, our workplaces.
I mean, just look at the contrast here. On one side, you've got the potential devastation when we do nothing. On the other, a vision of safety and resilience. The difference between these two pictures could be as simple as one automated system.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't really about circuits and sensors, is it? It's about protecting what actually matters: our families, our homes, our communities. It's about giving people some peace of mind in a world that can feel pretty unpredictable.
Look, we're never going to be able to stop earthquakes from happening. But with technology like this, we absolutely have the power to transform our buildings from just being passive structures into smart, resilient guardians that actively work to protect us. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought. If a relatively simple and accessible piece of tech can make our homes and cities so much safer from one of nature's biggest threats, it really makes you wonder, what else could we protect?